I know yesterday in the F-15 video I said that the Su-27 was next. Well, slight change of plans, I actually absolutely love the Gripen. It became a unexpected favorite of the patch. I have a great time playing this thing, and honestly, I can't think of the last time I enjoyed top tier as much as I have. The Gripen right now very much reminds me of the J7E back when it was in its prime. If you guys remember that, I adored the J7E. I played it all the time. I loved the play style of the aircraft. I loved the way it flew. It was just a great time. And the Gripen, well, it does feel extremely similar, and I quite enjoy that. I really couldn't be happier. What do you get with the Gripen? Well, you have a fantastic flight model first and foremost. This thing is up there with some of the best in the entire game. The thrust doesn't feel insanely strong, but it just feels like something with the airframe. Just keeps this plane in the air and keeps it from losing speed. You can sustain some pretty tight pulls while also just not losing any speed, which makes you pretty good at rate fighting. You can pull some pretty hard AOA, I'm talking 12 and 13 Gs pretty easily, especially so if you're running minimum fuel, it makes it even easier to pull. It's just a great feeling flight model. This plane is everything that I had hoped the F-16 would be when it was first introduced into the game. In 1v1 dogfights, you're probably going to be beating just about everything. The F-16A Block 10 might still be a little bit better. I'm not quite sure, and the F-15 will also probably give you a run for your money. I haven't done extensive 1v1 testing with these planes, it's just kind of a going by feel here, but the Gripen is without a doubt amongst the best for dogfights. It's one of those planes that if you're in a one versus situation and you can get everybody kind of in one direction, or whether that be put them all behind you, you can just kind of start spiraling around and turning in one direction, and people just won't keep up with you. They're not going to be able to pull the angle to get gunshots in, they're not going to be able to get missiles off, you're going to be too close of range for them to actually get an effective launch in, and you just keep flying in that spiral or in that circle, and eventually they just start to fall out of the sky, and you can drop down on them and launch a missile, or just kill them with your gun, rinse and repeat until the next person falls victim. It is a joy to fly, and I really don't feel any more confident with any other aircraft right now for a one versus situation. Also, side note, can we just admit that the Gripen looks really damn cool? It is without a doubt my favorite looking European Delta Wing Canard type aircraft. I think they really did the looks quite well. Switching over to loadout, you get 6 9Ms or 2 9Ms and 4 Sky Flashes, or 4 9Ms and 2 Sky Flashes. To me, the obvious choice is going to be 6 AIM-9Ms. The ability to fire and forget a really strong missile like the AIM-9M and continue tracking multiple targets, switching multiple targets, and being much faster than hyperfixating on a single target and guiding in that missile. On top of that, the Sky Flash is just not a very good missile. We're talking about an 11.0 missile that's on things like Phantoms. It really has no business fighting things at top tier. I'm sure there's going to be somebody out there that really wants a Sky Flash for a head-on situation, but it's simply just not a good missile. You can outroll the Sky Flash even if you're just flying straight at it and it won't hit you. Unless I'm offered something like the R-27ER, there is no situation in which I'm going to take a radar missile over AIM-9Ms. I'm going to run that 6 9M loadout. In fact, on the F-15, I would honestly rather have 6 AIM-9Ms than any of the Sparrows. To me, 6 9Ms only is a better loadout than 4 9Ms and 4 Sparrows. That does come with the caveat that the flight performance has to be more than adequate. You gotta have a really good fighter to be able to get away with just an IR loadout. So overall, I have absolutely no complaints about the loadout. The 6 9M is very good for me. And the next thing I really like about this plane is the absolutely infinite amount of countermeasures. Even on mixed, I have 300 plus countermeasures of each. The F-15, I thought, had a lot with 120 countermeasures of each on mixed. Well, the Gripen has 3 times that. You will virtually never run out of countermeasures, and what you can do is you can actually climb and sit at some pretty high altitude and wait for the right moment and orbital strike people like you would do with the J7E, for example. If you don't know what the orbital strike is, I have quite a few examples of them sprinkled throughout the video. They are the clips where I'm at extremely high altitude. I wait for the furball to develop, and once the furball is developed and everybody's hyper-focused on what's directly in front of them, you can just drop down and launch these 9Ms from 4, maybe even 5 kilometers away, depending on the aspect and speeds. And having the IRCCM that the 9M has is perfect, because even if somebody flares it, there's a pretty high probability that if it's an accidental flare, the 9M is going to reacquire the target and hit them anyways, unlike something like an R-27ET or an R-73 that uses gate with IRCCM. And why is it that the Gripen can loiter around at high altitude and not eat an R27 or an AIM-7? Well, it's just because the pure amount of countermeasures you have, you can 90 degree and chaff just about all of these. The R27ER is extremely difficult to notch and chaff, but with enough of a notice, which you're going to have at high altitude, you have all day to react to them, you can just spam that chaff button at a 90 degree angle and eventually it's going to work and you have absolutely no fear of ever running out. Ah, geez, it's this clip. This is coming back to me now. It's a very unfortunate event. This teammate that I had, shout out to you, man. He was a huge help at potentially winning us the game by not leaving me out to dry there against those F-16s. He ended up sacrificing himself because of it, but unfortunately, my girlfriend was right next to me, needed help adjusting the chair, so I turned over to adjust the chair. Don't notice I'm overspeeding, and I ripped my wings, making his sacrifice all for nothing. So sorry about that, man. Hopefully next time I'm a little bit more vigilant. And I do think that it is worth pointing out real quick that the Gripen's radar feels extremely nice. Unfortunately, you don't really have fantastic radar missiles that will utilize this radar, but maybe in the future, if it gets AMRAAMs or something like that, it'll be really fun to play. Here's an example of that orbital strike I was alluding to earlier. I start out with some altitude, I wait for the enemy team to just kind of get distracted in the furball. My buddy Jube is doing a fantastic job at baiting these three guys. They have no idea these AIM-9Ms are coming, and I just unload the entire rail, and you just kind of rack up kills very quickly in rapid succession. And when you do this at the right time, it really can make a massive impact on the game, being able to just rapidly erase people from the match this easily. And yes, I do realize that every plane can do this if it has 9Ms. Yes, that's true. But when you take the Gripen's flight performance, combine it with the HMD, combine it with the countermeasures that it has, it is just the perfect package to be making plays like this. And honestly, I think it is one of the most meta jets at top tier right now. It just feels really nice to play and it fits in very well. It can handle just about any situation you throw at it, and you're going to see a lot more 2 times, 3 times, and 4 times aircraft destroyed than you're used to at top tier, guiding in a single SAR missile at a time. Side note, the JAS39 Sea Gripen the UK has that is labeled as South African, it is exactly the same as the JAS39A. There is no difference right now. It is completely copy-paste, so there's really no benefit of taking one over the other. I guess the skins are different, and that's pretty much it. So, I mean, maybe you think the South African one looks cooler, there you go, but I'd rather play name brand Gripen. Also, one more thing. The targeting pod now actually spots people in top tier. So if you have a targeting pod and you point the targeting pod in the direction of an enemy, it will spot them for you and your entire team, revealing what kind of plane it is up to 20 kilometers away. And the Gripen, this isn't too helpful, I guess. Maybe it's more helpful to your teammates, but it would be really nice to have that in something that is good at BVR, that has some long-range missiles. That way you can kind of identify whether or not your target has R27ERs, if you have to be a little bit more careful about how you go about the engagement, that sort of thing. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the Gripen. I really enjoy this aircraft. I'm going to be playing a lot of it, at least until the possible nerf of the flight model, which I hope doesn't happen, but it very well could happen. That will be a sad day. I do think you should grind for it. I think you're going to enjoy it. And as far as raw effectiveness, I would probably put this thing in the top 3 best top tiers right now. Of course, that would be between the F-15, the Su-27, and the Gripen. I'm not exactly sure in what order. I'd have to think about that a little longer. But the Gripen is definitely in there, and it is indeed a joy to fly. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Tomorrow will be the Su-27. I promise I'm not going to switch it up, and I will see you then.